You are listening to the One Day at a Time podcast. On this podcast, my guests share their stories of alcoholism, addiction, and how they recovered so that you can too. My hope is that you find the inspiration and resources you need to let go of what's holding you back so that you can transform into the person you were always meant to be. Ready? Here we go. Hey friend, welcome to the podcast. My name is Arlena and I'll be your host. Imagine being so obsessed with alcohol at 12 years old that you land in rehab at age 13. My guest today is Christoper, and that's exactly what happened to him. He went on to struggle with alcohol and severe drug addiction for decades, which led him to the darkest side of humanity. But that's actually just the beginning of Christoper's story. In this episode, he will share how he was able to finally break out of addiction and adopt a lifestyle where he is absolutely thriving. So without further delay, please enjoy this episode and let me know what you think. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
And congratulations on 11 years today.
Thank you very much. It seems like yesterday sometimes, and then sometimes it seems like it was a different life that I didn't even live. Like it's so far from the life that I have today that it doesn't even seem real sometimes.
Isn't that funny how that works? Like when you're going through it, it just feels like it's taking forever. But then in hindsight, when you look back, it's like, wow, was that even my life?
Yeah.
Wild. Well, I like to start with a fun little game. I like to call the lightning round, which is very slow.
All right.
But I want to front load the episode with some resources. So when you first got sober, were there any books that were particularly helpful for you?
The Power of Now.
Good one. I can't believe people don't recommend that one more. What did that do for you?
It really put into perspective how not present I had been I got drunk for the first time at 12 years old and I got sober at 37. So for basically 25 years, I was not present at all. I was always in the past or in the future. And, like Eckhart talks about, the only place that we can really tap into any power of existence is right now, so if I can't stay right here, then I'm either going to fall into depression or anxiety, one of the two.
Yeah, anxiety for the future and depression about the past, typically, right? Yeah, that's a really good one. And I don't know, I would argue that I still struggle with that today. And thinking about what it is that I need to do or stressed out about like what didn't go well during the day.
Yeah. Anytime I catch myself, like my blood pressure going up a point or two, I can kind of feel it. And I wear a Fitbit monitor a lot of times because I track my heart when I'm getting ready for shows and stuff like that to see, how many hours during the day I was in like active fat burning stages and stuff like that. I have it linked to my phone. We get pretty scientific when you're trying to get to 4% body fat. It gets pretty scientific.
Ooh, as far as a little scary.
Especially when you're on a timeline too. So I feel my pulse go up a little bit and I feel my rate and I check my rate and I see it's going up and I pause and think, what am I thinking about right now?
Oh, that's good. That's really good self-awareness.
Causing this. And it's normally, like you said, I'm worried about a car payment that's not due for 3 weeks or just, you know what I mean? And it's the same amount every month. So why it's not like it's going up. It's, something like that. I'm like, oh, what happens if I break my leg and I'm off work for a month and I can't make my car payment next month, or just, little goofy stuff like that, where it's like, well, then you use a credit card. Like,
yeah,
there's a solution. Funny enough, they actually give me credit cards now. I couldn't,
right. Yeah.
couldn't borrow a nickel from anybody when I was getting high, but now that I'm sober and I actually go to work and pay my bills.
Now you got a good credit score. They want to give you some cards.
Yeah.
Funny how that works. That is a great book recommendation. I don't know if anyone has ever recommended that book, and if they have, it's been a while. We're at 345-ish, almost 450 episodes, and that is an excellent book. Do you have so we'll talk a little bit about what you do. You're in, very fitness oriented. That's not your job though, right? That's
Yeah.
okay, I don't think it's fair to call it a hobby because that's like a lifestyle. But anyway, we'll talk about that. But in recovery, we do a lot of self-care. Like that is paramount to maintaining sobriety. What does like your spiritual, emotional self-care look like?
Meditation. I I would venture probably to say that it wouldn't be a stretch to say if I did not learn how to meditate very early on in sobriety, I probably would not be sober today. Um,
Wow.
Meditation absolutely changed my life, and it's funny. I just had a discussion with someone the other day about when we see somebody go back out the door in 12-step fellowships, and you always ask what happened, which I don't really need to ask what happened. There's a line in the book that describes, says, suddenly the thought crossed my mind. That's what happened. I don't care if you lost the job or you lost the girl or the cat died or the neighbor died or whatever the situation was, because I've heard every reason in the world, right? But I've also heard people go through all those same situations and stay sober.
Right.
Because you lost a relationship doesn't mean you automatically get high. It's where are you at with your spiritual connection, as far as I've seen. And I've seen people check every box as far as they're like, I don't know what happened. I was going to meetings. I had a sponsor. I was reading stuff in the book. And I go, how often were you praying and meditating? Oh, I pray every day. I said, but it says prayer and meditation, not or. It's not like a buffet menu where you get to pick and choose. I said, like, where were you with meditation? Because I personally, in, as of today, 11 years, have never seen anybody who meditates every day go back out, even if they weren't doing all the other stuff, even if they didn't constantly go to meetings, and even if they weren't in close contact with their sponsor, and even if they weren't the typical AA box checker, so to speak, like they didn't do all the things that we hear suggested in 12 steps and stuff. But as long as they meditated every day, they went through life altering events and stayed sober because they were centered and grounded and they still had a spiritual connection. They were able to weather life storms.
That is a very interesting observation that I can validate after being sober for 30 years myself and being around large communities of people. That is a very interesting observation. A lot of people recoil at the idea of meditation. People think they can't do it or, it's uncomfortable. How did you start meditating?
I had a good friend of mine start talking to me about it. I was taken through the steps in 9 days. So it
That's
was very,
fast.
it's funny.
Were you in crisis mode?
Oh, I just came from the trauma unit at the hospital,
Okay.
literally on my deathbed. So they said, you need to get through this work like quick. They said,
Okay.
my first sponsor, God rest his soul, he passed away when I had about a year sober, from lung cancer. Didn't smoke. That's a bum deal. You didn't even get to enjoy the cigarettes and you still got lung cancer. Um, but he asked me to this day what was the single most life changing question that anybody had asked me my first meeting, I was like 12, turning 13. And like I said, I got sober when I was 37. So for 25 years in and out of meetings, I got asked almost every question in the world, except he finally looked at me and said, how long do you last on your own power? Once all the alcohol and drugs is out of your system, you're completely detoxed. And he said, I don't care whether you went to detox, went to jail, went to the hospital, whatever. When everything is out of your system, how long do you last? And I said, about 14 to 21 days. I cannot pick up a 30-day chip. I got a 30-day chip one time in my life, and it was when I was in a court-ordered lockdown facility where they didn't even bring us out to meetings. They brought meetings into us because they didn't want us out in public. And I got a 30-day chip there, and immediately got high after I left the facility. But that was the one time in my life where I actually made it 30 days, and it wasn't uh, for anything short of being locked in the place. But I said, yeah, about 14 to 21 days. And he said, beautiful. So we've got our timeline. If we don't get
Okay.
you connected to God within the next 14 to 21 days, you're gone. And judging by the fact
Mm.
you just came from your deathbed in the shock trauma unit at the hospital, I don't think you'll make it back this time. And I said, I don't think I will either. And so he took me through the work, and I got up to In the first 9 days, I was making amends. I was practicing step 10, which I'd never investigated or, or cared about before. Um, and then I got a friend of mine talked to me about meditation, and I said, "Oh, I can't do that." I had tried a couple of times. I said, "I can't do that." He said, "What happened?" I said, "Oh, the chatter in my head is so loud, and
Wow.
he wants to move. I can't sit still." And he said, "That means you need to meditate more."
Mm,
And I said, "But if I can't do it," he said, you're a meathead. You're a big gym guy. The first time you walked into the gym, did you bench 400 pounds? I
there you
said,
go.
he said, you start out with the bar, and then you add a couple fives, and then you add a couple tens, and you work your way up slowly to where you're moving heavy weight. I said, okay. He said, so you've never meditated before in your life, but you have this vision in your head that you're supposed to instantly be in lotus pose on the side of a mountain, in Thailand somewhere, going for 6 hours at a clip or something. And he said, that's not realistic because you're going against your body's too much natural instincts. You're trying to quiet the mind and still the body. And the mind wants information, the body wants to move. So you're trying to go against yourself. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, why don't you take about 12 deep breaths with a good pause between, get somewhere silent and just sit comfortably. You don't have to do the whole lotus pose thing or anything. He said, just get somewhere where you're sitting comfortably. 12 deep breaths with a pause between is about 2 minutes. If you can do 2 minutes, then maybe a couple of days later, try to do 4 minutes. And a couple of days later, and that was how it started. And I started realizing, hey, this is actually these first couple minutes, it's getting easier. And now I'm doing 6, 8, 10, and within about a week and a half, 2 weeks maybe, I was doing like a half hour. I just
Wow.
adding like 2 to 4 minutes each time. And that was when the shift happened for me, when the awakening happened. I came out of a meditation and I heard a voice say, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes and everything around me was glowing. I could literally see the Fibonacci spirals in the molecules in the air. And I was like, okay, is this really happening, or is this like an old Grateful Dead show coming back to say hi after all these years? And cracked my spine, and there was all those old wives' tales about you store acid in your spine. Is that coming back? Is this a flashback? Um, but then I realized that all of a sudden I was actually present for the first time since I was a little kid, and I was like, "There's
Oh,
trees, and there's grass, and the sky's blue." And I heard a voice say, "Enough of the bullshit. It's over."
wow. That is
Thought about I've
intense.
never thought about getting high since. Just
That's
hasn't.
amazing.
And I've been through a lot of horrible stuff in sobriety. I'm not one of those people that will say my what's the ignorant expression I hear people say? My worst day sober is better
Wow.
than my best day getting high.
Yeah, some bullshit.
That's, you had a bad connect, bro. I don't know what to tell
I
you.
know you weren't doing it right.
I had some absolutely amazing times getting high, and I've had some
Yeah, that's the truth.
horrible times at sobriety. My
Yeah.
mother-in-law, who I love like a second mom, my wife and I have been together for almost our entire sobrieties. She had a massive stroke and passed away in front of us.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She had 7 years sober at the time. Her sponsees were at the hospital with us. We used to go to meetings together, the three of us. Uh,
Wow.
and to this day, I can't talk about her without choking up.
I know. I know.
And holding my wife on the floor of the hospital, while we were both crying so hard, we were starting to like seize out. Um, I saw Jerry Garcia on mushrooms in the middle of a forest. I'll trade those days. I'll trade those
Oh,
days. I'll make that
I
choice.
see what you're saying.
You know
Yeah,
what I
for
mean?
sure.
That
Yeah.
was a great night, and that was the most horrible day I've ever experienced. So I've
Yeah.
been through some bad stuff in sobriety, man, but it just getting loaded is just never. I can't explain it. It's just not even there. It wasn't like I had to fight it or I had to call anybody or run to a meeting or like it's gone. It's truly gone.
That is so amazing. And it really ties back to the power of now, because in the addiction, we don't have any power to say no. We don't
No,
have any power over our feelings.
yeah,
But it sounds like meditation was your access to being fully present in the moment, which is access to power.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've never actually heard anyone put it that way. Thank you for sharing that. It's really beautiful. And I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
That's Super painful. My
So,
mother died of cancer in 22 days, and my husband and I talk about her. It was almost 3 years ago. Actually, it'll be November 3rd, it'll be 3 years. And yeah, you just never get over it. It's
yeah,
a painful experience in sobriety, but nobody got loaded over it.
yeah. It's funny you bring up the power thing. I I've got a very minimal filter. Even when I'm sharing in a meeting or when I'm speaking somewhere or whatever, I just and it's funny, the first time I got asked to speak at a big event, I called my sponsor's actually a circuit speaker. He's pretty well known.
Oh, nice.
And I called him.
Hook a sister up.
He's known for being he's known for being very controversial.
Oh, fun.
And he's an ornery little guy from Texas with one eye. He's got an eye patch. But I called him after I got done speaking because I said there was a group of people that loved everything I had to say, and then there was a group of people that like waited till after the event to kind of like argue,
Scold you.
you know. And he said, anytime one of us from our group speaks, there's going to be two lines of people. Just hope that one line is longer than the other. Because he said there's going to be people who want to hug your neck and tell you thanks for speaking the truth. You've confirmed what I've been saying all these years. And then there's going to be a group of people that want to take exception with everything you said that have been, he calls it couch broke, is the expression he uses.
Couch bro.
Spent too much time on couches and treatment centers.
Oh.
They've diluted the message of the 12 steps down to where it's almost unrecognizable. And it's just like they treat it like it's CBT instead of being a way to connect with God, you know?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
it was funny because I I called him and told him what had happened, and he said, buddy, I'm not even going to beat around the bush with you. He said, you told me exactly what happened to you when your transformation occurred. I said, yeah. He said, you were given a message to carry. Are you going to have the balls to carry it or not? If not, then step aside and the rest of us will. But I think you know what to do. I said,
I
okay.
love this guy already.
Yeah.
Well, listen, he's talking about having courage,
Yeah.
and it's scary to tell the truth. And I do kind of adopt the, honesty without compassion is cruelty, but there is something about being so pure in your message that it is confronting. It will confront people's limiting beliefs. And I think that's necessary and important, but it's challenging
Hmm.
for some people to hear. And people would rather make you wrong than do the
Well, a lot of people,
self-examination.
the whole reason that came to mind is with the power thing. You hear people all the time talk about, and they're just parroting something that they heard somewhere. I'm just powerless over everything. I'm just powerless over people, places, and things. I'm like, all right, first off, I'm a grown ass man, and I decide exactly who I associate with, where I go, and the things that I do because I actually have a mind that I can use these days. It's not
Yeah.
days from drugs and alcohol. Because before, my addiction told me who I had to associate with, the neighborhoods I had to go to, and the things I had to do. It was the driving force. And today I actually have an awakened spirit and I can make those kind of decisions. And I said, here's the thing. The book talks about being powerless one time, and it's where step one's written and how it works. That's the only time the word powerless is used in the entire book. You know how many times it talks about having access to power and feeling new power flow through us? 37.
Wow.
Why do we concentrate on the powerless part? Because that lets me keep playing the victim.
Okay, but can I just say that's it's a phrase, not a singular word, right? It's powerless
Mhm.
over alcohol. And I would argue, and I say this all the time, I would argue that everybody is powerless over alcohol in the sense if you ingest alcohol, it sets off a chain of chemical reactions that change your behavior, and
Yeah,
we are powerless to reverse that chemical reaction. It takes time for it to
yeah,
cycle out.
yeah,
So but it's powerless over alcohol, not everything.
yeah. It says we've recovered and been given the power to help others.
Yeah.
If I don't have any influence over that person, then why would it tell me that I have the power to help them? What's the point of sponsoring a guy?
Yeah. So that's the thing is we cannot control people like they're
Mhm.
puppets, but we do have influence.
Yeah.
And I bet I love talking about this stuff. Thank you for bringing it up. But it's like, you ever walk into a room and you're like, you can cut the tension with a knife?
Oh yeah.
Like you got like you didn't hear anything, but there's tension.
Yeah.
Or like you go to a concert and the room is just electric and you just get sweat. It's like that's influence. Like
Yeah.
our
Absolutely.
mere presence has influence, but we don't control people like puppets, but we do have influence, but mostly choices over our own actions. Maybe not always, but yeah, access to
My wife
power.
has a big habit of complimenting other females on things because she said somebody did that to her one time years ago and it completely changed her day and she couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. That somebody she didn't know just said, "Oh my God, I love that skirt," or something like that. And so
Yeah.
she makes a habit of doing that. And the way people light up when you do that,
Oh,
you can influence somebody's whole afternoon. They might have been having the shittiest day and thinking, I just look terrible. I feel terrible. And all of a sudden you go, wow, those shoes are amazing. Where'd you get those? And they go,
yeah.
really? These? And their face
Who,
lights up.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't do that
what
to,
about
you'd smack me, but I can say that to other guys.
yeah. Yeah, that might be a little inappropriate, but that it's what a nice way to demonstrate that you see the best in other people, that you see someone else. That's a beautiful way to demonstrate that. Okay, so I love this. Thank you for explaining the process of how you came to meditation and man, the benefits and the power. That's what we're looking for, right? The complete
Mhm.
psychic change, and it starts in the brain, and meditation has all the it's the way to change that. So that's super important. So how often are you meditating every day then?
Mhm. Yep.
Every day, how long do you meditate for? Half hour?
Right around 20 minutes, half hour, somewhere around there.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
not a huge time commitment. And are
Mhm.
you doing it in silence or do you use music?
I either do silent the whole time or I will start out with the binaural frequencies.
Oh, love those. Yeah.
432 and 528 are my two. Those are my two frequencies.
Those are your frequency.
Yeah, I've been through the whole realm of the different frequencies on the binaural stuff, and
Yeah.
we had a machine that in the it was like a lab. It was a treatment center I worked at years and years ago, but they were really into the pathways of the brain. It was a really big thing. So they had a whole separate section of the treatment center. They had like the regular therapy, for like one-on-one and group therapy, but then they also had a lab where they would put you on machines to read, like brain waves and stimulate and stuff
It's,
like that.
it
And they had,
sounds like a transmagnetic stimulation, TMS.
yeah, it was before TMS though. They were just like reading. They weren't really doing any of the
Interesting.
actual with the helmet with the
Yeah,
TMS
yeah, yeah.
thing yet. But I actually had a client that I transported. I worked for his family and transported him to the first place in Florida that was doing that. He was one of the first cases because he had like really gone through every antidepressant ever and nothing had an effect. So they said, you're the perfect candidate for seeing if this has any kind of an effect for medication resistant depression.
Yeah.
But they had a machine in this lab called the BOD machine, and what it was like it was an acoustic uh, wave that just made the frequencies, like the binaural frequencies. And you put the headphones on, and they would try it out on people that said that they couldn't meditate even for like 30 seconds. And they'd put the headphones on, and they'd find that right frequency. And the next thing you know, they're like stretched out with a big smile on their face, and they're like it basically forced you into, you know, and that's what I
Yeah.
suggest to a lot of guys that I sponsor if they're having a problem with meditation. I give them the breath thing first, and they're like, but I want to go longer. And I'm like, all right, well, try the binaural. I said, it'll basically
Yeah.
hypnotize you, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm actually certified in hypnosis and there's a lot of connection between the two.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. Um, so what is getting back to I told you this lightning round was very slow. Um, what is one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
Hmm. That I actually learned it pretty quickly. that it wasn't about the number of meetings attended. It was about the working of the steps. Um, we put such an emphasis, especially I worked in the treatment field for almost a decade. For the past a year and a half, I've been out of that. I work in social service. I work for veteran services. Um,
Okay.
um, but there was always such an emphasis put on the amount of meetings you go to. And I've literally been at meetings before where people have broke down, and I'll never forget a girl breaking down in tears because her sponsor had just fired her because she was supposed to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, and she had to work late one night and couldn't get to it. She normally always went to a meeting after she got off work, and her boss made her stay late for work, and she missed the meeting. And the next day she called her sponsor and said, I missed the meeting last night. And her sponsor said, that wasn't the deal. We're done.
That's some bullshit right there.
Like, are you kidding me? And the funny thing is, somebody's having a hard time, or they're struggling, or they're coming back from a relapse, and the answer they get is like double up on your meetings. I'm like, well, if the kid was going to 7 meetings a week and he's still getting high, what the hell good is going to 14 going to do? It's
Yeah.
not, if nothing inside changes. I tell people all the time, I'm like, who goes to a meeting every hour of every day? The chair. The chair in the
The
clubhouse.
chair is always
I
there.
mean, how spiritually advanced do you think that chair is?
So this brings up an interesting point because you and I are both advocates of 12 step, but you and I also, when we did our little pre-chat interview, are very clear that there are some things that are problematic about
Mhm.
it. And, but you and I have both found ways around things like that. Like, and let's just be clear, people that are sponsors are not trained professionals, right? It's peer support. So they're passing along what worked for them. That does not mean that they represent that organization as a whole. And it just is specific to that person. And it's so, I hate to hear it when people have bad experiences like that, because then they throw the baby out with the bathwater, they
Yeah.
blanket the entire program. And that's also extreme thinking that does not serve us. So, but I'm glad you brought that up because it's important to acknowledge that it's not perfect, but it's still a worthy endeavor.
I look at it as my job as a sponsor, and I was taught that was one thing that was not negotiable in my sponsorship lineage. If someone asks you to sponsor them, the answer is yes. Period.
Period.
If things don't work out down the road, they don't work out down the road. I've never had to fire a sponsee. They disappear sometimes.
I know. Yeah. Bless
But
their hearts.
normally about the time you tell them to start writing a 4-step, that's when you know if you're going to ever hear from the guy again, or you're going to see him 2
Yeah.
months from now getting off a detox van somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That 4 step is really scary.
Yeah. And it's something that was impressed to me by both my first sponsor and then the man that's been my sponsor for the last 10 years, is that they were not taking me on to raise. I was not their kid. They were not going to be responsible for every decision I made in life. That, are you supposed to take that job or not take that job? And if I called, they go, how the hell would I know? Seriously, first off,
That's a good sponsor.
if I called my sponsor right now on speakerphone, the first thing he would say, I tell the people this all the time, the first thing he would do, he's got this little chuckle he does anytime you ask him a question. And I've only done it a couple times in all these years, ask him a question about something. And he goes, well, and he could hang up right there and he'd be right.
Answers are inside you. You
You
know
know,
what to
you
do.
already knew. You knew before you called me what the right
Yeah.
answer. So you're either calling me because you want me to talk you out of doing something stupid, or you're trying to pull me over to the shitty side of the fence with you.
Yeah.
But before
Yeah.
you ever call, first thing he'd say,
Yeah.
what God say?
What did God say?
What God say?
I
What you
wonder if,
feeling, when you sat with that thought for a minute? Did it feel like the right thing to do? My wife calls
ah,
it a belly button barometer.
yeah, that internal compass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think there's maybe this is a difference between men and women because my husband's been sober for 35 years and he kind of it sounds familiar. Your type of sobriety sounds very familiar to his. He's like a man's man kind of guy, and they are. I feel like men are can be very direct with each other. And but I also feel like women sort of tend to process out loud. Like I need like things need to make sense to me. And I'm aware that I have some crazy ass ideas. And I need to go to my sponsor and be like, okay, this is what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
And she helps me to like she and I will process out loud.
Yep.
And it helps me come to the conclusion that I already know. Because the one thing that she taught me from the very beginning is I have no idea what's right for you. Like
Uh,
the first time I called her to ask her, I was dating my husband in the very beginning, and I called her and I was like, "Hey, you know, I would tell her something about, and she'd be silent, and I'm like, I could hear her breathing, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm trying not to give you advice."
yeah.
I was like, "That's a good sponsor." I
Yep.
was like, "Just tell me what to do."
The only thing my sponsor said, I'll never forget it, when he my first sponsor, when he first um met my, at the time we had just started dating, and I said, so he said, so new girl? I said, yeah. And we were both, I don't know, about 3-4 months sober at the time.
Scandalous.
Her first sponsor had actually introduced us, because her sponsor had already been pulling me to go speak places.
Ah, she vetted you already.
Yeah. And so she told her, she said, normally I wouldn't be real jazzed up about, one of my sponsees with only a few months sober, getting into a relationship. But she said, if you're going to pick a guy, at least I know he's a good one. At least I know he can
Aw.
walk. And my sponsor said, new girl. I said, yeah. And he said, I said, do you, and he just looked at me with a big smile and said, not my business. Got nothing to
Wow.
do with me. And I said, well, I just thought, you're my sponsor, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you're not hearing me. It's got nothing to do
Wow.
with me. He said, your relationship with God and her relationship with God has nothing to do with me. And it doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with each other.
That's beautiful.
So he said, you care about her? I said, yeah. He said, she care about you? I said, yeah. He said, good for you. And that was it. And then my current sponsor, he uh, met right after my first sponsor had passed away. And he got out of the car and he looked at her and he goes, she must think you got money. And I looked at him and he goes, she's way too pretty for you. And I said, thanks, Chris. And he goes,
Thanks,
no
buddy.
problem. Where are we going for dinner?
Men are brutal. Men are
Yeah.
brutal with each other. That's so funny. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit about how we got here, right? I'm always so curious to hear like what people's, childhood experiences like what your parents did. Like, did you have siblings? What your household temperature was like? Um, what was that like for you?
Only child, born and raised right outside of, about an hour and 10 minutes outside of Chicago. It's considered the farthest northwest suburb. It's Rockford. It's the
Huh.
second biggest city in Illinois.
Mhm.
Well, I guess now they're going back and forth with Peoria, so it's either the second or third. It depends on what year they take the census. Um, Dad worked at Chrysler. He's an Army veteran, then went to work at Chrysler right after he got out of the military. Mom worked for a good portion of my life, especially when I was young. What's now Verizon in the Midwest, it was GTE, and then it became
Oh, sure.
when they became a company. Um, so never wanted for anything as a kid. I was an only child. Lived in a nice house, surrounded on basically three sides by forest reserves. Uh, so I got to go get lost in the woods and all that kind of stuff. I had a couple friends in the neighborhood, but nobody I was really that close with besides my next door neighbor. And I was a couple of years older than him, so I didn't really have a whole lot of that, like the older brother or real close friends or anything like that.
You were alone a lot?
Yeah, not necessarily alone physically, but mentally for sure. I felt like it
Like
was,
no peers.
yeah, I felt I was kind of on my own. My dad played a lot of sports in his spare time, and he also refereed high school, college, and semi-professional basketball. So he was gone several nights a week doing that. And he drank a lot. I've got a second edition big book that my mom actually bought because she was trying to figure out if my dad was an alcoholic because of the way.
Oh, interesting.
And him and I have talked about it a lot of times since I got sober. And uh, he had his last drink of the day that he checked me into treatment for the first time at 13 years old.
Do you relate to the need for external validation? It was something I struggled with my entire life, always striving to improve myself so that I could achieve some goal that I thought would make me feel better. I felt like I was working so hard all the time, but I never felt like I really arrived. I would occasionally hit the wall and I would feel burned out, frustrated, and just totally discouraged. It wasn't until I learned about parts work that I was able to sort out what was going on inside, validate my own feelings, and take action that was more authentic and more in alignment with my values. The end result is that I am now more connected to my purpose and I feel more fulfilled without being burned out. Does that sound like a shift you want to make in your life? If you're ready to let go of the struggle and burnout, then you might want to consider doing parts work for yourself. To find out more, visit SoberLifeSchool.com, click on the coaching tab at the top, and book some time with me to see if parts work is right for you. Now, back to the episode. Treatment was 13.
Yeah. Yeah. I started drinking at 12 and I was full blown alcoholic by 13. I had taken out, they had a big wet bar at the house, and I had pretty much gone, they had like a handle of everything for when they had like parties and stuff back then. They'd always have, parties on the weekend and stuff as far as like cookouts and stuff like that with the guys from my dad's softball team or whatever. So my dad drank beer, but there was like, a handle of tequila, a handle of vodka, a handle of gin, a handle for people that wanted to make mixed drinks. And I had pretty much gone through that entire bar within about the first, I don't know, 5, 6 months that I started drinking.
Oh,
Because I
at
knew the
12.
one thing, I hated beer. I hated the taste of it. It was just so sour and nasty to me. And for the other thing, I knew that he counted the beers. And if he bought a 12 pack and there's 6 of them gone, he's going to go, wait a second, I had to drink 6 beers this afternoon. Where's those 6 beers? But they didn't pay any attention to that, and they didn't know that I was drinking yet. So I could take, my thing was I'd take like a Mr. Pure apple juice bottle and put like 4 shots of vodka, 4 shots of tequila. It was like a Long Island, basically, without,
Wow, at
and then drink it as
12.
fast as I could. Yeah. I just went
Why? Why were you drinking at 12?
because the first time that I got drunk, and went out and hung out with a bunch of people, I remember a friend of mine's older sister, um, invited us to come with them to a little house party. And she said, "Do you guys want something to drink? We'll go to the liquor store. We'll get you something." And I said, "I don't really like beer." And she said, "Why don't you get like she's like, "You're always drinking orange juice." I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Why don't you throw some vodka in there and make screwdrivers or something?" I said, "All right, that sounds good." And I took out a handle of Smirnoff 100 proof and proceeded to vomit all over these people's brand new house with white carpeting everywhere. And it had
So
spaghetti,
a great
spaghetti
first
for lunch.
experience.
Yeah,
Oh
spaghetti
no.
mixed with orange juice all over their brand new white carpeting. Um, but I couldn't wait to do it again. I actually ended up in the hospital the next day because I took so many aspirin trying to get rid of the headache that I ended up getting aspirin poisoning. I definitely had alcohol poisoning looking back,
Yeah.
but I took so many aspirin trying to get rid of the headache so I could drink more that I ended up going to the hospital because I started like ringing in my ears from the aspirin poisoning.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
but that was the first time that I felt like comfortable in my own skin around people. And I went, okay,
Wow.
I need to do this as often as possible forever because this is what's
Yeah.
gonna help me get through. Now I understand why people drink. And from then on, it was just, it just got worse and worse. I started a couple years later, it's about a year later, maybe, started smoking pot all the time, and probably 2 years after that, um, got a hold of some Vicodin, and a year or so after that, I got some cocaine, and then all through like my 20s was, I didn't think I had a problem because I sold a lot of stuff, something to be proud of, but I sold a lot of different drugs, and so I always had something. And it's funny, I tell people all the time, like, you won't know you're a heroin addict until you don't have any.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't know I was a cocaine addict because I always had cocaine. And there was plenty of times when I didn't do any, go out on a Saturday night and I was just like, I'm not doing anything. I'd cut lines out for other people and sit right there and drink with them and watch them do it. And I wouldn't even do one. I go, I'm not a drug addict. I just don't have that gene or whatever it is that makes people drug addicts. And that changed when I got introduced to heroin.
Mm.
I absolutely loved it. That was it. It was all downhill from there.
Man, heroin will take you to the depths of despair.
I will say this though, it might sound crazy, but it's it's so terrible to see nowadays with the fentanyl epidemic that, like, for as bad as heroin is, at least if you screwed up and relapsed over the weekend or something, you you got a second chance. You know what I mean? You went back to detox, you went back to treatment, you now you go out and you're dead. You screw up one time and you're dead. I mean,
Wow. Yeah.
I never knew anybody to die from $10 worth of heroin. I've never seen it. I shot
And
dope.
you're saying people are dying over $10 of fentanyl.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
That's wild.
have resuscitated what, 8, 9 people now.
Oh my God.
And some of them I saw what was left. So I saw, was that one bag? You didn't even hardly do any of it. They were like, I know, I did a bump and flatlined. Yeah,
Wow.
like
Yeah.
nobody snorted $10 worth of heroin and died. For as horrible as heroin is, I'm not advocating for it, but I don't know anybody that's ever done $10 worth and dropped dead on the spot.
Yeah, it's a different world out there now.
And the crazy thing is, there was so many people that think they're doing heroin.
Oh shoot.
Like I said, I worked in treatment for almost a decade, and you wouldn't believe the number of people that I checked in, especially the last few years. Um, that I'd ask them when I was doing their detox admission. I'd say, "All right, tell me what you're going to call positive for, so I can let the medical staff know he's going to be
How to
detoxing."
treat you. Yeah.
So they're set up. Just heroin. That's all I do is heroin. Okay. Give them the urine screen, and it comes back negative. I'm like,
Oh, so they think that they're doing heroin, but they're not.
I got good news and bad news for you. The good news is you're not a heroin addict. The bad news is you're addicted to fentanyl.
Wow.
There's a separate, some of the cups now have it built in, but back a few years ago, there was a separate strip that tested just for fentanyl, because you can give somebody a test, somebody that's doing fentanyl, you give them a regular cup test, a urine test, and it comes up negative for opioids. It comes up negative for morphine. It comes up negative for oxy. It comes up negative for codeine, all the active alkaloids of the poppy plant. They're not there because it's purely synthetic, and it could be carfentanil or alpha 1 fentanyl. There's like 5 different forms of fentanyl that the cartels are pumping out pretty much. It could be any one of those.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. Let me circle you back to, what it was like for you, because it sounds like you went through the ringer for, from 12 to 37. That's brutal. That is a long stretch of torture and suffering. Um, Maybe you can talk a little bit about, like what were the experiences that you had that eventually led to you getting sober?
The the worst was really the last probably 8 years, somewhere around there. Most of the
It's a
time I was
long.
on the street, um, middlemanning deals all day just to stay high. Um, I allegedly did some criminal activity along the way to support my habit, but I wasn't a big a lot of people turn to, like, we call them boosters in Chicago, go into Walmart and steal 10 cans of baby formula and then go sell it to the quickie mart down the street. Or I had a buddy that his thing was Axe body spray and deodorant. He'd go into like a Walgreens and he would literally take every can of Axe and every Axe deodorant on the shelf and fill up like a huge duffel bag and just run out the door with it. And then he would go straight to like the little bodega style. They're it's like a 7-Eleven, but it's not a real 7-Eleven. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mart with a Q or something, or with a K. and those guys would buy everything to put on their shelves for, if it was $5, they give you $2 for it. So,
Right.
but I was never that confident in my shoplifting ability. And I always thought to myself, you know what? If I'm going to be dope sick, I'd rather be dope sick like on the street or on a couch or even on a park bench than in a cell. Because I've been dope sick in a cell before. It's horrifying. It's going through heroin withdrawal in jail is. I did it 2, 3 times. Absolutely horrifying. So
Brutal.
I was normally I don't know, lucky enough to meet the right person that had a good supply. And I knew a lot of people that were leery about going to the areas where you have to go. And nowadays you can find it from everything I've seen and everybody I know and everybody I've talked to, because I still talk to people back north, and it's like, you can buy heroin in the suburbs. Well, years and years ago that wasn't the case. You had to go to the hood. And
Yeah.
it's not the fact, at least around Chicago, it's not that you really have to worry about getting ripped off, because everything is so gang controlled that they run it like a business. So they want you to come back every day. So there's no point of ripping you off for $100 today if you're going to never come back again. And I could have you come back every single morning at 8 a.m. with $100. You know,
It always baffles me that people can, I mean, come up with that kind of cash.
but you
Like
got to get that out. And being a white person in those neighborhoods, you stick out like a sore thumb.
yeah.
We'll know that. So
How did you get $100? Did you have like $100 a day habit?
when I finally quit, I was at almost 500 a day. My morning one
How did
morning
you?
my morning wake up shot was 15 bags. That was just to get the sick off so I could function and get out of bed. Uh,
How are you coming up with $500 a day?
selling.
Oh, selling. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's brutal. What were some of the things that happened that you're like, this has to stop? Like I listen, we all do terrible things when we're, addicted to drugs and alcohol. What were some of the things where you're like, this has to stop? Like what helped you get to your bottom?
As it's crazy as it would sound, the things that I look back at now that I'm like, wow, that really should have like smacked me across the face and woke me up a little bit. At the time, I just went, this is the life, and this is the way that I'm going to be until I end up dead in a gutter somewhere. I had kind of just accepted that was my fate to some extent. And I mean, I've seen people get murdered right in front of me. I've seen people get stabbed to death. I've seen people get shot. Seen armed robberies, all kinds of craziness. And that wasn't, at the time, it might have freaked me out for like a day, but it was like I'm right back in the same neighborhood, by the next night. And the thing that really woke me up, I guess, was that I wasn't dying. And
Mm.
towards the end, I was definitely attempting it. Um, so I've joked with it, it's kind of a crazy thing to joke about, but those of us that are in recovery have a little darker sense of humor than, if
Yes, we
normal
do.
people heard some of the things we joke about, they'd be like, "You people are absolutely maniacs."
Yeah.
But it's like, if you try to off yourself, even with fentanyl, like it doesn't seem to work.
Mm.
There'd been times where I loaded up 50 or $100 worth of fentanyl laced dope that I knew for a fact had fentanyl in it, and done it, and thought, this is it. I'll be gone. By the time they find me, I'll be purple. I'll be gone. And
Wow.
all it did was just get me high. And I was like, great. Now I wasted all the rest of my stuff for the night. And now I got to wait till tomorrow. And then 2 days later, I would do like 10 or $20 worth of it, and wake up in an emergency room. And I'm like, well, how is this fair? When I try to do it, it doesn't work. But when I'm just trying to catch a buzz and I only got a few dollars, I end up not even catching a buzz and ODing and almost dying. So it was like, I'm not going to be the guy that ODs. I'm going to be the guy that's 95 years old on the park bench.
Oh, that was terrifying.
Yeah. I was
Did
like,
so you wanted to die?
oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole self-loathing and hating who you are and how did I get here and the whole nine.
Yep.
You mentioned in our pre-chat interview I don't mean to be leading, and
Mhm.
certainly we can cut this out if you want to, but you mentioned that you resorted on occasion to male prostitution.
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend that had already started doing it. Um, and he had I noticed he was like coming up with pretty decent amount of money here and there. And I knew he wasn't working and he was doing the same kind of little like middleman deals and shit that I was. And I was like, where'd you get $250 like out of nowhere, you know? And finally the one day he was messing around on my computer. I'm like, what are you doing? And he like closed the window real quick. And I was like, dude, what's going on? I'm like, where are you scamming somebody online? How are you getting this money? And he was like, you really want to know? I go, yeah. He goes, you want to make some money? I go, yeah. He goes, you willing to cross some lines? I go, I mean, I'm a street junkie, so yeah, I'm kind of willing to, cross a few lines. And he said, take your shirt off and stand against the wall. So I said, okay. And I stood against the wall and he looked at me and he goes, oh yeah, they're gonna love you. And he took his phone out and he took a couple pictures. I had a nice six pack, and he then he plugged his phone in and popped the picture over the laptop and got on a site and uploaded it. And I go, how is this going to make any money? He goes, 10, 9, 8. And he started counting down. And by the time he got to 3, the message thing started dinging. I could hear it go ding,
Wow.
ding, ding. And I was like, all right, so what's the deal? And the original thing was he had a hustle. There's a big expressway, and a lot of the businessmen that are in Chicago for events and stuff stay at the hotels right there around the airport and right there around the expressway. So he would always pick the guys that were staying there because he said about 8 times out of 10, those guys are married with kids at home and their wife doesn't know that they're bisexual.
Mhm.
And he said, I go to their room and tell them that it's, $200 for a massage with a happy ending. And they give me the money and they take off their clothes. And then I run out the door.
Oh,
I go,
yeah.
and they don't, he goes, what are they going to do? Go running through the lobby of the Hyatt Regency naked when they're there for a business conference?
Yeah.
Well, they just figure I just lost $200. I got scammed.
Yeah.
And so it started out as plays like that. And then it ended up being to where sometimes you had to do something to get the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I crossed some lines that I didn't think I'd ever cross. But that wasn't really as weird as it sounds. Like I was more worried about somebody finding out about it than it was like it really didn't bother me because I don't know.
You didn't feel bad about it. You were just worried someone would find out.
Sex is sex. You know what I mean? I lost my virginity at 12 years old, and so like sex was never that big of a thing to me. I
Mhm.
worked at what 4 different strip bars over the years, so I saw sex and money go hand in hand every night that I've worked.
Oh, yeah.
And it just it's what people it's the world's oldest profession for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've never been homophobic in any way, shape, or form. I was the first straight DJ to hold residency at a gay nightclub where I'm
Mhm.
from. Um, so it really didn't bother me, but I was so petrified that somebody was going to find out about it. And then when I finally got sober, and I of course disclosed that when I did my fourth and fifth step with my sponsor. And it's funny because it's like you tell him something, and I'm waiting for him to go, oh my god, and he was like, dude, you think that's crazy? Check this shit out, and told me a
Yeah.
story that blew me away even more. And he's like, I don't know what
Yeah.
to tell you, man. San Francisco in the '70s was some wild times. Okay.
What a relief though. And you know what's so funny? What struck me as you were saying that it's like we get so hung up, like we get sober and all of a sudden everyone turns into prudes, right? It's like, bitch, please, you didn't come in here a nun. Stop it.
Oh, one of
Stop
the
clutching your
funniest
pearls.
Yeah, one of the funniest things I ever saw. There was a lady that was a member of my home group when my wife and I lived in West Palm Beach, um, and she seemed like she could be your great grandma. Like you would have tea with this lady, at a nice restaurant on a Sunday brunch or something, and always very well put together, and just spoke very eloquently and all this stuff. And I'd never heard. She always shared really well, and she was a hardliner with the big book. And she sponsored women, and I always had a lot of respect for her and liked her. And one day they asked her to tell her story. I almost fell out of my chair because she started telling her story. Dude, she was a meth addicted hooker in the 70s, in the late 60s and early 70s, in like the Haight Ashbury district in San Francisco, like with the original hippies. Like she was like, yeah, I was one of the first people who got turned out on speed and started turning tricks and blah blah blah. I'm like, you're like my great grandma. What are you talking about? This can't be real. And she's like,
Yeah, we are unrecognizable from the people that we used to be. Unrecognizable. That's wild. Thank you for sharing that. I was kind of leading you in that direction because I feel like there are so many people who are so ashamed. As when it comes to sexuality, people they hold such shame about the things that they did when they were drinking and using. And so we do need to bring that to light and just be like, you know what? That's part of the deal. Like sexuality in itself isn't shameful. It's how we judge ourselves about how we behaved when we weren't even in our right minds.
and that's why people are so afraid to write a fourth step.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why,
because of the shame. Yeah.
because of the shame. And it's like, and I think I've seen it done, not very much recently. I've been to a lot of good four step meetings in the last couple of years, but I know when I first came in, when the four step would come up, it was like we almost, as a fellowship, scared people out of wanting to write one. You know, it's just like, oh my God, it was just hell and it was torture on earth. And it's like, somebody that's a few weeks sober hears this and they're like, dude, I'm never doing that. That sounds terrible. And before they know it, they're back out the
Yeah.
door. And it's like, if you just sit down and write it, like I was telling my guys, I'm like, look, man, if there's a name for it, one of us has done it or one of us has seen it done,
Hmm.
part of it. And
Yeah, it has a name because we did it.
yeah, like it's really not that big of a thing, man.
I know. I often tell people, I'm like, look, you cannot scare me.
No,
You
I
cannot
have
scare me.
done hundreds of fifth steps with guys, hundreds.
Yeah. I feel like they should be done in private. I'm not really sure about the,
We always
I
do
think
one on one,
one
privately.
on one and private. Yeah. Like, to be clear, it's like, four step meeting, people talk about the four step, but there's a reason why they say that we share in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, what it's like now. But listen, things get said that need to be said sometimes,
Mhm.
right? Like we were talking about earlier about being confronted by the ugly truth. Oftentimes, and listen, that was the thing that like when I was doing dropping my fist up and that's what took the shame out of it to the point where like usually when I share my story, I talk about how I was and like to encapsulate it, I say that if it was in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it.
There you go. That sums it up.
That sums it up, right? Like
Yeah.
I was doing that shit. And
And I
there,
think I told you that there was at least two guys at one meeting and a couple guys at another meeting. When it was a like a meeting on the fourth and fifth step. I don't recall, officially whether it was fourth or fifth, but and inventory got brought up, and of course the sexual inventory got brought up, and it was like everybody was making such a big deal out of it, and I didn't plan on revealing my, deepest dark
history.
secrets, but it just came out. I just shared it, and I,
Yeah,
I was like, What are you going to scare me with, man? What are you going to judge
can't
me
scare
for the
me.
shit that I did when I was on the street and I was really sick? Judge away. I know exactly who I am today. I'm not scared of who I am today. I'm not scared to face the man in the mirror that I am today. I
Mm.
know what I did back then, but I did what I had to do to survive. I did what I had to do to get by from day to day. And
Yeah,
you want to judge me, man? Go ahead. The old glass houses line comes to mind on that. We've all got some things we'd rather not advertise publicly. And I talked about what I had done briefly, and I had at least two guys come up one meeting and a couple guys come up in another meeting when I said something about it, and they were like tears in their eyes. They're like, I thought I was the only one.
oh,
And I was like, bro, look at the
oh.
room right now. There's what, 40 dudes in here? 38 of them.
38 of
38
them.
of them easily. There's two
Yeah,
guys over there, not so much. But the rest of them, yeah. I was like, dude, like it's a very common
so
thing.
common. I tell I have two boys, and when they were growing up, maybe this wasn't appropriate. But I would tell them, I go, I'm not going to tell you that drugs are not fun. I don't want you to get to college and freak out at college like, oh my God, they never told me how much fun it was. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's fun, but just know that you might end up with a dick in your mouth.
Yeah.
And if that frightens you, then maybe don't do that shit.
Yeah.
They weren't that little when I said that, but but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like we need to be honest about potential cause and effect, as they say.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so you were kind of alluding to like being in the almost dying,
Mhm.
and then you got like so you had sounds like you had many relapses, many meetings. You tried 12 step for a long time.
Relapse is a funny word to me because I say to people all the time, I'm like, anytime somebody comes in to say they're coming to a meeting for a couple weeks and then you don't see them, and then somebody goes, "Hey, what happened to Joe?" "Oh, he relapsed." I go, "Did he really though?" Because the word relapse means a return to a previous state or condition. So if I come into the clubhouse on the first day of the month and I am restless, irritable, and discontented, jumping out of my skin with anxiety and drowning in shame and guilt for my past, and I go to meetings for 2 weeks, still feeling the exact same way every day. And after 2 weeks, I finally go, you know what? Fuck this. I can't take it anymore. I'm gonna go get loaded. And I go get loaded. Is that really a relapse? Or did I just go get high? Because
Yeah, I
in
see
order
what
to
you mean.
relapse, I feel like you had to have recovered from the addiction.
Hmm.
And then, like, if somebody's, sober for a period of time, and I'm not even going to put a specific date on it, but they've been through all the steps, they're working with guys, they're doing, everything they're supposed to be doing, and they stop and they start going backwards down the steps, basically, which normally I've watched it happen so many times. It's like they stop working with others, and then they stop praying and meditating, and then they stop doing a 10-step checklist every day. They stop making amends when they've wronged people. Then all their character defects in 6 and 7 start glaring back out. Next thing you know, they're lying to their significant other, they're cheating. The amount of guys and girls that I've seen go back out the door. I tell people all the time, you want a guaranteed relapse? Cheat. Cheat.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. You will not stay sober cheating on your spouse. Guaranteed. Either the guilt will eat you alive or you'll get caught and they'll go screw somebody else to get back at you, and then the anger will eat you alive. One of the two things is going to have to see it watched it over and over.
That's
And
messy.
back all the way down to the bottom, and now bam, I'm no longer
Yeah.
connected to power. So now I'm powerless again. And
No longer connected to the power. Yeah.
you know,
It's messy. It is. We are a messy group of people. That is for damn sure. Yeah.
I've watched several people I know lately that's how it started with chasing the shiny things,
Yeah.
the new car and the new house and the Rolex and
Money, property, prestige. That's
yes.
from our primary purpose.
And they start getting attention from maybe this girl that used to not pay them any attention, but
Mhm.
now they got $100,000 car and $20,000 watch. So now maybe that girl they always thought was so hot is paying them a little bit of attention because they go, wow, this dude's a baller. And next thing you know,
Security. I
starts
see
out with a little,
security in my future.
yeah, starts out with a little, uh, who's the one rapper? It goes down in the DMs. That song. It starts out with an instant
Well, that's
message.
yeah,
And next
that
thing
is
you,
sneaky. Sex and love addiction is so easy to hide.
yeah,
And you're right. Like it's so interesting how I'm sure you see this too. Like people get the drugs and alcohol down, but we need to continually be growing and healing. There's a lot of people have a lot of trauma, but if that trauma is left unaddressed, we will find another way to distract. And sex and love addiction is very easy to hide, but it gets you just as sick
oh yeah.
and at least to just as dark a place because it leads to hopelessness and helplessness. And it's a terrible place to be.
We've got a guy in my sponsorship lineage that we talk about. He's gotten better now, but a few years ago, this guy was big Texas oil money. This guy, he was one of those guys that he could have smoked crack 24 hours a day for the rest of his life and never had to worry about going broke. He made more in interest every month on the millions of dollars that he had in the bank that he could possibly do in drugs. Um, but he was putting a pretty good dent and starting to lose a lot of money and starting to lose properties and all kinds of stuff. So he stopped making payments on them because of the blackjack table.
Ooh, gambling. Ooh, that's nasty.
I see. I don't know if you guys have it out there, but I know here in Florida they just legalized sports betting, and one by one, I'm starting to see all my buddies in their Instagram stories and their Facebook posts. They're like every day they're betting on a game. We got Hard Rocks right down the road here, and they've got a Hard Rock app you can put on your phone, and
Make it so easy.
bet $20, and hey, they won, so you won 60, and you're like, oh, great, I just won $60, so I'll take that 60 and put it on this, and yeah.
Gambling is terrible. Yeah, there's many other addictions that we can fall prey to if we're not vigilant. And it was like you said, there's that saying that it doesn't matter how far down the road you go, you're still the same distance from the ditch. At 11 years sober, at 30 years sober, I recognize that like I stay on the path because the consequences on either side are so detrimental.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The consequences are severe.
And it's the longer you stay sober, it seems like of course, materialistically, you're probably going to acquire more things. You're going to have
Yeah, more to lose.
more
Yeah.
pleasure. But even the relationships that I've managed to like build with my family and my wife and stuff like that, if I was to just go off the chain, I can't imagine being able to repair those.
Let's talk a little bit about like how fucking awesome your life is now. because because you have so many good things going on. Listen, you have solid recovery, you understand the space, you're committed to your sobriety, you're committed to helping others, you're a man of service. But you also you're a fitness guy,
Mhm.
which is sort of a slight understatement. You're wearing a barbell neck. For those not watching the YouTube, you're wearing a little barbell necklace. You got
This
your
was
dark
a
sport
anniversary
t-shirt.
present from my wife.
A barbell, that's awesome. Little barbell neck. But listen, you're competing at a very high level. Tell me a little bit about what brings you joy.
Um, I love the challenge of it. Is really why I got into it. I'd seen Arnold on stage when I was a little kid, and I said, someday I want to do that. And then I watched my cousin competed for years.
Oh,
Actually getting back on stage this year for the first time in years and years. He's 50, about to be 53. Still shredded to the bone. Like,
that's amazing.
gonna, he works a full time job, but he's also a trainer and a coach on the side. So he's always been in great shape. And then one of my best friends went all the way to Mr. Universe.
Ooh,
Uh, so it was like I was around it, and I'd been to shows, and I'd always seen it, and I loved the idea that like you can't explain to somebody that there's a big difference. And I don't say this in any way to I am proud as hell of anyone that steps over the threshold of that door into their local gym. And I don't care
oh,
if they are in
yeah,
the best shape you've ever seen. You know who inspires me the most? The people that are in horrible shape at the gym.
yeah. Oh,
And
the courage.
us to get in better shape. I
Ooh,
love it. I love seeing it. I'm like, if that guy got off his couch tonight, I don't have any excuse.
it
You
gave
know,
me chills. I literally have head to toe chills because that requires so much courage.
so much. But the thing is, you can't compare going to the gym and working out, which I did for years and years,
Mhm.
um, to prepping for a show. It's it's
That's a whole nother level.
different. It's like playing Call of Duty on PlayStation and actually being an Army Ranger or Navy SEAL that's in a combat zone. It's
Yeah,
not the same.
it
Uh,
is not the same.
when you're weighing grains of rice, everything you eat is tracked and weighed for. I usually do 16 to 24 week preps. Um,
Oof.
so you're looking 6 months, 4 to 6 months of everything you eat, and then you're training 6 days a week, and you're doing cardio sometimes 7 days a week. Um, so it's a whole different world. And just when you think that you can't go any further, you can go so much. Your mind will quit a million times before your body ever does.
Mhm.
There's been so many times when I've been sitting, I've screwed myself up sitting in the recliner watching TV going, after this show I'll go, after this show I'll go, because I'm just so tired after I worked an 8 hour day, and I came home and I ate, and I don't go to the gym in the morning. I know some people like to go at 5 6 in the morning.
Oh
I'll
yeah.
at least 2 or 3 meals in me before I train.
Okay.
I tell people all the time, I've had buddies, you want to meet me at the gym at 5 in the morning? I go, dude, I have to get up at 2. They go, why? I go, because I got to eat at least twice.
Okay, so you don't do fasted
I
training.
tell people the same thing. I'm like, if you really want to change your physique, if you're gonna go on a cross country drive before you get on the interstate, you're probably gonna put gas in your car, right?
Yeah,
It's the same. It's the same
it's the
thing.
same thing.
Change your physique. You're gonna eat about 45 minutes to an hour before you train, and then you're gonna eat within an hour to 2 hours after you train.
Got it.
So to do that is a different. It's just a different world than I was used to before. And the first time I did it, it actually made it easier for me now. A friend of mine who was Brandon Hendrickson, he was Mr. Olympia for men's physique, which is the division I competed in. He was Mr. Olympia 3 times.
That's the division you're competing in, is Mr. Olympia?
No, no, no. Men's physique is the
Oh,
division.
men's physique. Got it.
I'm the
I
Olympia's.
was like, what the what?
No, one of my
It's
close friends
insane.
was Mr. O 3 times.
Oh
Um,
my God.
I joke about it that the first season that I competed was I started prep in November of 2019. What happened in February 2020?
Oh,
COVID.
yeah.
So I was supposed to be on stage in March,
Oh,
pushed to April, and then it got pushed to May, and
oh
then it
no.
got pushed to July. And they weren't canceling shows. The promoters,
They didn't want to refund the money. Nobody knew what was really going to
yeah,
happen. That's a mess.
they've got so many deposits because if
Right.
throw the shows are at like the Grand Ballroom at the Hilton in Fort Lauderdale or something, to where that's
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars to rent that
Right.
space, and then the lights and the sound and everything else. So they've got $50,000 or $75,000 wrapped up in deposits plus the promotional stuff and everything else, and all of a sudden they got to cancel the show. They don't, so they just kept pushing them and pushing them. I didn't get on stage until the end of September. So
So you had to be in that like top peak physical condition.
I was so over it by that point, though, because
Oh, brutal. I bet your wife was over it.
I had like peaked and come off, and then peaked and come off, and it was like every time they'd say, "All right, the show's going to be in 3 weeks," then we'd start, that final push to where you get super leaned out, and then all of a sudden they'd go, "Show's canceled," and you go, "All right, eat for a couple more weeks. Let's get, we'll pump up the food a little bit more." And so by the time the show finally was, I just wanted to get it done. But we joke about it now because being in prep your first time for just short of a year, that makes like a 16-week prep. That's nothing. I can do that with my eyes closed.
Oh, so you're like very conditioned to suffer in that very specific kind of way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
When's your next show? You have another show coming up?
December 21st,
Oh, wow. And what's it called?
the Holiday Showdown,
Holiday Showdown.
Holiday Classic Showdown, Holiday Classic Showdown.
And what age group are you competing in?
Well, I always do open class, which is there's no age on it. It's anybody
Oh,
from
okay.
1 to 80. Normally, the open class guys are normally in their early 20s.
And you happen to not be in your early 20s.
49 in April.
Oh,
Um,
congratulations.
so do masters, which
Okay.
do whatever masters there are that I fall into, because there's like a 35 and older, a 40 and older, a 45 and older. So I can normally do, if they have all three of those, I'll do all three of those. But then I'll do the open one
Mm.
just to see where I stack up against the young guys, you
Yeah.
know? And like my last show, I won.
Yay.
So they don't really go by, well, then we can't let this guy win. He's older, because I tell people all the time, you can look immaculate on Instagram 2 weeks before the show, even a day before the show, and you can look absolutely flawless the day after the show. If you don't look immaculate the 30 seconds that you're posing in front of those judges under the lights, it doesn't matter. No,
It
that's the only
doesn't.
thing that matters.
Ooh, the margin of error is so narrow.
It's, and I've missed it before.
Oh.
I've looked and gone, what happened? Before on the same thing. It's just such a, at that point, your skin is so thin,
Yeah.
it's like tissue paper.
Yeah, you got
So
to be careful.
everything you eat is going to affect you. And it's like you want to eat just enough carbs because your muscles are about 80% water.
To stay alive.
You gotta eat just enough carbs to make your muscles pop. But if
Yeah.
you eat a few too many carbs, then you do what's called spilling over, to where the water fills up the muscle, and then it starts to fill up the skin.
Yeah.
All the lines that you see between
All
the
the
axes,
striations. Yeah.
all the striations start to go away, and it's just soft. And you're just like, I just spent 6 months getting all these lines, and they're gone.
That's a lot of suffering.
Yeah, yeah.
I bet your wife is over it.
She actually, it's funny. She's great now. The first couple of shows, she was getting got a little annoyed, but
Yeah. I
now,
only say this because I dated somebody who used to compete.
yeah, now I'm at work, and she'll call me and be like, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need egg whites? Do you need more ground turkey? Do you what do you are you doing fish right now? Do you need tilapia? What do you?"
You
She's
need broccoli. Some
yeah,
bullshit.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other level of self-discipline. I feel like that's channeling your energy into something positive because I feel like we all have like this energy and it needs to be channeled appropriately.
And the funny thing is that it's gotten me. I've been around the world now with the dark sport, the company that I'm an ambassador for.
Hmm.
I've got to go all over the world with them.
That's so cool.
Photo shoots and video shoots. I've filmed like 9 or 10 different videos with them. And it's like and the whole thing started because my first show, I wore a pair of their stage shorts because we wear like the surf shorts on stage and
Oh,
physique.
uh-huh.
We don't wear the bikinis, we wear like surf shorts.
Yeah.
And I wore a pair of their shorts, and I kind of just gave a brief synopsis of my story. And the owner of the company reached out to me, and he was like, "Hey," he's like, "I've got an idea." And their whole motto is all their stuff. I don't know if you can see it's NFGU,
Oh, I can't see it on camera. Oh, there it is. It's a cross. Oh, okay.
but it's always NFGU, which means never fucking give up. And that's
Nice. On a cross.
in,
That's hilarious.
in every area of life. Like you don't give up.
Yeah, right, right.
You don't let the fear and the doubt sway you. You go, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm doing it. And
Love it.
you move
Yeah.
forward. And he said, we're doing a special collection to kind of, and they're huge now. You can't walk in a gym and not see Wolves stuff.
Oh, very cool.
Dark Sport Wolves Club. And at the time, they were like just a little tiny niche brand that, like, if you didn't compete in men's physique, you didn't know what Dark Sport was. You
Mm.
had no idea. And now they have all kinds of athletes and stuff. They just started a Dark Sport Hawaii, which is a bunch of guys that are either MMA fighters or professional surfers.
Oh, nice.
And it's the same mentality and the same attitude. And they said, we want to invite you to, like, come with us and represent. We think your story is incredible. And I've gotten to meet, the top level guys in all the divisions and all these sports. And it's just been, it's weird how many people message me and say, you're inspiration to me.
Yeah.
It's like I figured out a couple years ago that, like, my journey in bodybuilding is a lot like my journey in recovery. Like, it started out for me.
Hmm.
It's not about me.
Not about me.
Not about me. It's bigger than me.
Yeah. I love that, man. That is so inspiring. And I really appreciate you, sharing your story. It's amazing. Once we get sober and we channel our energies into something positive, you stay on the beam,
Mhm.
stay true to the principles. It's just magical, the things. I can't imagine you could have predicted this when you were, on the straight. Yeah.
I'll
So
tell you
it's
what,
just,
the one thing that really, I just want to gotta say this. Every once in a while I get somebody that makes a smart ass comment about when bodybuilding comes up. They're like, "Oh, so you just trade one addiction for another." And I go,
yeah,
is going to the gym for an hour a day, because I train about an hour a day, maybe an hour and a
that's not
half.
bad.
I don't if you're training,
I sit on the couch longer than that.
I hear guys say sometimes they're like, "Oh, well, I was at the gym for 3.5 hours yesterday." I'm like, doing what? Well, you couldn't train with me.
Socializing.
Couldn't train with me for 3.5 hours. I guarantee you. I'm not the most badass dude in the world, but you couldn't train with me for 3.5 hours. I've got
Yeah.
friends that train with me that will attest to that. We go in and we're doing about 5, 6 different exercises, 4 to 5 sets on each one, and then we're done. We're home eating.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's like, I've never lied to my wife to go to the gym. I've never stolen anything to go to the gym. I've never lied to my employer and taken a day off to go to the gym. I've never all the things that I did for my addiction. I don't do any
Yeah.
of those things for that. So I don't really consider I don't consider it an addiction.
No.
That's got a really negative connotation on it.
I feel like people who say that are just confronted by their own mediocrity.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to be rude. My girlfriend calls that spiritual rudeness. you tell the truth. Oh my goodness. Well, Chris, listen, congratulations on 11 years. I'm so grateful that I got to spend this time with you today on your anniversary. Thank you so much for your courage and being able to share some really important things. And man, where can people find you? You're on Instagram sharing your journey?
Instagram, yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's Soldier SOUL
Oh no. Oh,
Soldier76 on Instagram.
I lost you for 1 second. Soldier76 at Instagram.com. On IG. That's awesome. Well, I'll leave the link in the show notes in case people want to reach out and connect with you. But listen, thank you so much for your time today. It was very inspiring, and it was so great to just hang out. One last thing before you go, you can follow the podcast on Instagram for daily inspiration at ODAT Podcast. And if you'd like to get a biweekly email from me with recommendations to books I'm reading, meditations I love, or other recovery podcasts, just sign up for it at odatchat.com. That's ODAAT chat.com. And if you do, I hope you enjoy it.